What if the cloud was created after AI was created?
How do you understand a customer?
You really have to understand what is the pain point.
It's Jeff Bezos' famous framework, the PRFAQ. Where and how did you use this?
There are two things to it. One is the framework, the second is
There's one very counterintuitive decision you made. We are sitting here in 2023 and ChatGPT is released. Within a month's time, you announce Amazon Bedrock. What made you think that was the right decision? Because it became the fastest product of the decade.
I had very strong conviction.
How did you know the GPUs are going to be the go-to for AI?
You look at it and you say, this can do things that this current thing simply cannot.
Will I have quantum computing on my palm?
So,
what would you suggest IITians did right or what they can do differently?
look, I think the IIT system is a very unique system.
One technology you're most excited in the next 5 years? Today I have the privilege and honor of being with someone who's at the bleeding edge of technology. It's not just that, someone who knows that this technology is going to take over even when it's in an infancy stage, when nobody sees it. I have the huge privilege and honor of being with Dr. Bratin Saha. He made waves in Amazon by building a product which was the fastest growing business, a multi-billion-dollar business of the decade in AWS. It was called the Amazon Bedrock, and he also made waves with Amazon's SageMaker, the open source product which opened our minds to a whole new industry. And he quit Amazon to start his next journey at DigitalOcean, and this is going to open up a whole new world of clouds for agents. And how are we going to manage this? What kind of products and services are going to be appealing to people who are building agents? So without further ado, let's bring on Dr. Bratin Saha. Dr. Saha, welcome to Control Alt Podcast.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure being here.
So Bratin, tell me, you started your education at IIT Kharagpur, the top IIT in India, and then you went on to do a PhD at Yale. You're also an alumnus of Harvard University. So tell me, here you are at IIT Kharagpur with this amazing education, systems thinking, you're acing it. What was it like for you to come to the US and lead products, build multi-billion-dollar generative AI empires for companies like AWS, and not to forget 14 years at Intel, where you did transactional memory, and then you come and see that Nvidia, the hardware is going to, industry is going to blow up because the AI revolution is coming. So what was the part of Bratin that changed, and how did it change?
Thank you for having me first. At the end of the day, it's about betting on a few things and working diligently to produce products along those technologies. So,
yeah.
Right after my PhD at Yale, I joined Intel Research, and at that point of time, Java was a big thing.
Yeah.
And Intel was looking at, hey, how do we design processors that make use of this? And at just that point, industry was transitioning from C++ kind of languages to Java. Java wasn't still widely deployed, but it had a set of properties that provided durable advantages and durable solutions to real pain points in C and C++. And that's why I felt like, this is something worth betting on, because I think the industry will transition. Fortunately, it came right. In a lot of these bets, luck plays a big role. So, I don't want to minimize that. And then what happened is, I was closely involved with the processor teams. And especially in one of the processor teams, and I was kind of more hardware software co-design. I was doing the software part but working closely with the hardware, and it was apparent to many of us, including me, that it was hitting a wall. And so at that point of time, Intel started working on multi-core, and it just, you connect the dots of technology transition. Like, you can look at the sequence at which tech is going, and you can say, okay, where is this going to hit? And so you connect the dots and you say, look, multi-core is going to become big, and the industry entered into multi-core. So I was fortunate, that was a good bet, and started working on multi-core things.
So I'll quick question, but you're still thinking about technology there. Were you acquiring skills on assessing the business side?
Yes. So, and that was part of the reason why I went to Harvard Business School, and then I came back, and then I would also read a lot of books and say, okay, what makes products tick? And when you come in, when I started, you feel like, if I deliver a great technology, then it'll work.
Yeah.
And very soon, through these things, as I was working on different things at Intel, some things worked, some things didn't work. Very soon I realized that tech is just one part of it.
Yeah.
In many cases, it may not be the most important part of it.
Yeah.
And so then, working on very different things, like some things had real commercial success, some things did not. And just sitting down and analyzing and talking to other people who are really good at business and trying to understand what goes into making a successful product, what goes into making a successful business. And that is when I realized tech is one part of it. But really understanding the customer very well is the most important part of it. Kind of the go-to market, how do you sell it, how do you market it?
So how do you understand a customer?
It really, you need to really understand their pain points and talk to them. And this is one of the skills that I really got honed at Amazon, is working back from a customer pain point, like really truly understanding the customer pain point. It's easier said than done. You really have to understand what is the pain point, which pain point is really worth solving and that they will pay money for. And when do you get to a point where you're solving enough of the pain point to make it worth their while to use it? Because if you solve too little, it will be like you didn't make a meaningful difference. If you solve too much, you may be taking on too hard of a problem that you never get it done. So that there's a bit of intuition involved, there's a lot of practice involved, there's a lot of talking to the customers involved, but really getting that really nailed, I think, is the first. Like without that, there is no product. You can have all the technology in the world, there's no product.
So here you are at DigitalOcean, Chief Product and Technology Officer. What's your day like? How much % of time do you spend understanding the customer pain points or listening to the customer?
I think a majority of my time goes there.
Wow.
The majority of my time
it is so important.
Yes. I think I spend quite a bit of time on, majority of the time is really understanding the customer, their pain, talking to them, understanding their pain point, and then trying to, along with the team, translating it into, okay, how can we build something to make their lives better? I think quite a bit of the time goes into organizational activities. At the end of the day, you can have the best technology and the best go-to market, and you've figured out all the customer problems and all that, but if you don't have a team that executes and delivers, you got nothing. So a lot of the time also spends on organizational matters, and then some of the time spent on reading and trying to think of what is coming around the corner, because you have to be able to anticipate this is what is coming down the line, and how do you prepare for it.
I have a question related to this. It's Jeff Bezos' famous framework, the PRFAQ framework, where you write down a newspaper cutout of what your product is and its features are, and then you start working backwards. Where and how did you use this? And my question is more like, did you interface with Jeff Bezos at all, and while building these amazing product lines like SageMaker or Bedrock or the Q, the Copilot, coding Copilot? Tell me about PRFAQ.
So I did interface with Jeff. Interfaced a lot with Andy Jassy as well.
Wow. Why did you leave Amazon?
I think, look, Amazon is a great company. I had a great time, but I think DigitalOcean offers opportunities. We are at a unique point, and we can talk about it in terms of how we get to kind of the next innovation wave. I think the PRFAQ is pretty central, and what it does, there are two things to it. One is the framework, the second is the act of writing it down, because the act of writing things down really forces you to think very, very deeply and then the act of having it reviewed by an Andy Jassy or by a Jeff Bezos, the kind of insights they give you is really, really helpful, right?
How do you prepare for such meetings? I'm very curious. Imagine like you have a meeting with Jeff Bezos in like a week. What is Bratin doing to prepare for that meeting?
Well, you started preparing for that meeting much earlier than a week. A week before the meeting, you better be done with all the materials. I think you want to know the customer pain point very well. I think you want to know why your solution is going to be a uniquely differentiated solution.
Yeah.
I think you want to have really dive deep into what is it you're doing.
Yeah, the market size.
Pretty much every aspect, and even the technology, you want to have dive deep. And you also want to be pretty honest about what is not going to work, what are the problems, and so on. Because both of them, both Jeff and Andy, they have an amazing sense of figuring out kind of what smells right and what doesn't smell right.
How do they do that? What are they equipped with?
It's one of those innate talents of great entrepreneurs, I would imagine. And I think also there's experience. I mean, they've built a bunch of stuff. They've seen what works, what doesn't work, so you can do some pattern matching.
Do they have mentors who help them achieve these kind of traits?
I would imagine so. Like, I know I was helped a lot by them. Just, it's educational just to see how they operate.
You mean mentors or working with Jeff and Andy?
Working with Jeff and Andy.
So they are kind of like mentors
Yes,
themselves.
they were kind of mentors themselves, and I would imagine they had similar ones. I don't quite know. But, Andy himself worked with Jeff for a long time, so I'm sure he got that mentorship. So a lot of this some of it comes from kind of the innate tendencies of a person. Some of this comes from experience, some of this comes from observing other people, and some of this comes from making mistakes and then being coached by someone on how to make these things. So I think it's really a combination of factors.
So here we are 1 week before meeting with Jeff Bezos, and then you're telling me about PRFAQ. So is there anything else you want to talk about it?
I think there are a few questions. So I think there are a few questions or parts of the PRFAQ that you want to be really good about. And the way it works is the first paragraph of the PRFAQ is really a very concise summary of the key attributes of the product and why it is useful, right? And getting that nailed down is really important. And then there is, of course, the heading of the PRFAQ, and often that heading took the most time because you need to capture a lot. And then there is the pain point of the customer. You really want to make sure you understand that. And then there is, how you're solving it and why it's differentiated. And then finally, the user experience. How is the customer going to use it? I think if you get these things well, you're probably on to a good PRFAQ review. And then if you truly understand your durable advantages, then you're probably in pretty good shape a week before the meeting. And then if you have understood what is it about the product that customers will be disappointed about, so you know, okay, I know this is what isn't going to work at launch, but it's manageable. And what is it about the product that they'll really like? So I have something that will hunt. If you've covered all this, then I think you're in good shape.
No, this is great. So what is not probably going to work or disappoint, that's the inversion principle. So it's like if this does not work and customer sees it like this, it's a total failure. So I'm never going to get there. What do I do not to get there? And
it also forces a different kind of discipline, which is when you're launching something, often it's not the perfect product. You have to make trade-offs. You have to decide, this is my scope, right? Because ultimately speed is very important. That's one of the other things that I learned from all of these leaders and all of my coaches and mentors.
More so Amazon,
Nvidia, Jensen, Dwight, they were also like that. Speed is very important. So you don't have the luxury of, okay, I'm starting and I'm going to take a few years to get there. You have to get something out quickly. Iterating with customers is really important. Like, it's very hard to accurately predict what they want. You get in the ballpark and then you have to get feedback to iterate, right? So the point is, you have a time constraint. You have a resource constraint. What that means is you have to make trade-offs. There's only this much that you can ship. And this question around what is it that customers will be most disappointed about,
Yeah.
if you've really thought through it and if you have been really upfront about it, that shows you have really thought about the trade-offs.
Yeah.
And you have really considered them and you have made a conscious decision that says, here is why I'm not going to do it.
Yeah.
Right? And often that act of saying no is more important than what you're doing.
Yeah.
And getting that validated
Yeah.
by an Andy or Jeff or the others, and kind of having them sign off on it,
Yeah.
and you being able to defend it shows that you have thought about your product at a deep level, right?
Yeah.
And so I think all of these, like together, if you have done this, then a week before the review, you're
Then you're
probably
good to
in
go.
good shape. Though, you shouldn't get surprised if you're doing multiple iterations, because, there's always stuff that these people can have thought through that you may not have thought through. And so, you get feedback and you say, okay, let's do a next iteration of it.
Yeah, wonderful. And do you include budget details in these presentations? And
You do.
okay, it's
You
usual.
have an overall budget, and then you have a different pricing document. And in
Yeah.
the pricing document, you talk about the P&L and what's the expected revenue, what's the expected margins, what does the ramp look like. So ultimately, you're building a business. You're not just building technology.
Yeah, wonderful. So, as we talk so passionately about customer centricity, there's one very counterintuitive decision you made. We are sitting here in 2023 and ChatGPT is released. Just within a few weeks or within a month's time, you go ahead and alongside your team, you announce Amazon Bedrock. This is an aggregator kind of technology which gives access to the users to various models from ChatGPT or Anthropic or Cohere or whatever. Why did you do that? Like, how did you know that this is going to work? Why didn't you build? We almost thought Amazon is going to come up with their own model to rival the Bards and the OpenAIs, right? With billions of investment going in. What made you think that was the right decision? Because it became the fastest product of the decade.
I think I had very strong conviction at that time that one model is not going to rule it all, right?
How did you know that?
And I'll get to that. We had debates about that, and there were more pros and cons of whether we should do that. And I had very strong conviction that we needed to support the best of breed.
Yeah.
Okay, and I think it was for two reasons. First is, at that point of time, OpenAI was first to the market,
Yep.
right? But there were others. Anthropic was there, Cohere was there. There were few others, and I also had a belief at that time that there would be some models in open source. Llama came later, but that there would be
look
open
what
open
DeepSeek
source.
did.
DeepSeek,
God.
Quen, and all of these, right? I think one of the things is there is so much innovation outside of one single company that is very hard in today's world to say that one company will own all the innovation for any length of time, right? Somebody is first to the market, but then every other company is smart. They are going to have different things, and then they're going to work in different ways. The other reason was just conceptually, having one model solve every different kind of problem in an efficient way, may happen, but it feels more natural that you will often have some model be good at one set of tasks and another model be good at another set of tasks. And so when you think about the customer, and again, this really goes back to customer centricity. When you think about the customer is better served if they have choice, right? So we approach it from that angle.
Yeah, so this is more flexibility and ability for the customer to choose from. That's what you're going back to the customer here.
Yeah, you start with put yourself in the shoes of the customer.
Yeah.
Does the customer want access to only one model? Or does the customer want access to the best model for the task, even if it's not an Amazon model? If you put yourself in the shoes of the customer, then the customer wants the best model regardless of whether it's Amazon or not. And Jeff and Andy both had this thing, when in doubt, ask what is the right thing for the customer. So you ask this question, you say, look, giving them the choice and having this choice of models is a good thing. So that was the first part of it. Then the second part of it is you look at the market, and OpenAI came first, but you saw Anthropic, and Anthropic was fairly good as well, and you could say they would get there. And some of these other companies, you said, okay, they will probably get there at some point.
Yeah.
And then you look at some of the benchmark data, and you say, in these situations, this model seems to perform better, if not accuracy, better cost. And so you do the triangulation, and you see, look, it's going to be very hard for one model to just rule it all.
Yeah.
And so I had very strong conviction. Amazon went that route. Many people at Amazon also, had that conviction. And so the nice thing is, at that point of time, every other company was saying, okay, I'm going to bet on this, and this is going to win it. And we were the only ones who said, there's going to be this. And now, if you look at it, everybody is falling down. Everybody is saying, okay, Microsoft says, okay, we have OpenAI, but we now have a deal with Anthropic, Google's Gemini and Anthropic and others. Now that is the norm in the industry.
Amazing.
But we were the first ones to do that.
Yeah, at that time, I can imagine the stress when you make a decision like this, and how you bet on your insights and your feeling in the customer. So that's amazing. I do want to compare and contrast the leadership style of Jeff Bezos and Jensen Huang. Of course, Nvidia is a company, the largest market cap, and they've rolled out so many miracles. So what was different about working at Nvidia? You were there when machine learning was just an academic curiosity, and it became like at consumer level, it blew up. So what was it like to see that particular trend, and what was Jensen's leadership style like?
Look, all of them are great leaders. Both of them are great leaders. I have learned an enormous amount from both of them. They have been very kind and empathetic with their time and with their wisdom. So, these are all great leaders. These are all leaders that teach you a lot in every interaction with them. And even if you're not interacting with them, if you're just seeing how they operate, seeing how they think, there have been many instances with them, with Jensen or with Jeff or with Andy, where you're sitting down and they're asking a question and you're thinking, how did they get to that? Okay. It's not like you are sitting there and you have been researching that topic for many months, and then you go to them and you make a presentation and you say, how did they zoom into this?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
How did they ask that really difficult question, and how do they ask that most important question? It's just, these are great people. That's all I'll say.
How do you contrast the good? Let's look at the good aspects. The leadership style, is Jensen more hands-on, or is he more in the future, or is he more in the moment? What kind of leadership is he?
Look, I think all of them got into the details. I think all
they can handle complexity, a great deal of it.
All of them. I think all of these leaders have a common set of characteristics.
As in?
Visionary, get deep into the details, know the customer very well, are able to inspire people, are able to communicate very well.
Yeah. Which you are also displaying all of these based on my research.
Hopefully. Are able to inspire people to lead. Grit. All of them. If you look at Amazon, it went through tough times. If you look at Nvidia, it went through tough times. They have all.
And how they pulled through the pandemic, my God.
Yes. And even before, Nvidia, even before, when I was at Intel, it had hard times. And even when I joined Nvidia, it wasn't necessarily the dominant company that it is now.
Yeah.
So I think all of these are really, I feel like all of them have the same set of characteristics, or a similar set of characteristics, that goes into making these people great.
Amazing. So there's one thing about the Nvidia which fascinates me. Here they are building GPUs for gamers and for crypto miners. What particular, I would say, parameter you studied deeply to make your bet on, no, this is going to go beyond gamers, this is going to be an industry disruptor? How did you know the GPUs are going to be the go-to for AI, machine learning, explosive growth?
I think, and you have to give credit to Jensen and Nvidia that they pursued on this. I think when I was at Intel, and you look at all the data, Nvidia was publishing a data, Intel had the data. You look at all of it, and you clearly see situations. And I think this is true of any technology. It's true of AI, it's true of GPUs, it's true of any technology that you look at. You look at it and you say, this can do things that this current thing simply cannot. Like, you look at, at that point, let's say when I was making the switch from Intel to Nvidia, and Intel at that time was the bigger, more dominant company.
Of course. Just like
there were
Google.
many people, when the first I joined Nvidia, there were many people who said, why did you leave Intel and what did you do and this and that? And, in hindsight, it worked out to be the right decision. You look at it and you look at all of the data, and at that point of time, CNNs, convolutional nets were just coming up, and some of the other machine learning
the AI winter it was, people thought.
Yeah, it was just coming out of that.
Yeah.
And you looked at just various parameters in terms of performance per dollar, performance per flop, just the various things, and it was like orders of magnitude better. Okay, and you could also then say that this particular tech will need a lot of compute, and so you're trying to decide between two things. You're trying to decide on this thing which is a GPU is not just like 20% better, it's not just like 2x better, it's like orders of magnitude better, and this is a domain that needs orders of magnitude more compute. And so then you put those two together, and then you say, is there any path to this really getting to that? At that point you say it's only a matter of time before this thing that is orders of magnitude better at that particular domain becomes the driving force in that domain.
Yeah, so that's happening now for quantum, right? Quantum is orders of magnitude better than what AI can do, and now you started looking at where can this be applied.
Yeah.
But it's useful, massive problems, but
and it'll, I think there are a class of problems that quantum can solve really well or will solve really well.
Yeah, will it be commoditized ever? You think it'll be commoditized?
I think depends on what you mean by commodity.
Will it be will I have quantum computing on my palm?
I think.
Will it be on a wearable on my glasses or something?
So, if you go back, let's say if you go back 50 years, 40 years, right, when the CPU just came, when Intel was formed, or even when I joined Intel, right, at that point of time, if someone said, hey, will these CPUs that we do, will they ever be in the palm of the earring, it would have seemed fanciful. So to that extent, I don't want to necessarily say it won't ever get there, because it may be that here is what is going to keep happening, the amount of compute that each one of us uses in our daily lives will keep on increasing and increasing and increasing.
Yeah.
Because a lot of the things we do will become automated. Like, searching the web got automated through the phone and so on. And then very soon, with voice recognition and all that. So I think it is fair to say that the amount of compute or flops or whatever that every human will use is going to go up and up and up and up. Right?
Yeah.
And it started with us CPUs being good enough for that.
Yeah.
As AI becomes more pervasive, you will see GPUs or AI processors becoming pervasive inside of cell phones and glasses and all of that. And then as we get to the next frontier of a new set of human-like tasks that humans want to do, and it's all not done in the cloud, I think you'll see more sophisticated compute get in. So I think the one constant is that we are going to keep using and keep rapidly increasing the amount of compute that we use in our daily lives.
Amazing. So that means hardware is going to be back. Like the hardware,
it's always, it's already, if you look at the number of startups now doing AI hardware, for a long time as Intel became ascendant, there wasn't a lot of hardware startups around. Like, CPUs was it, Intel was it. There wasn't really anyone around.
Yeah.
And then as AI came in now, and of course, Nvidia is ascendant, and AMD is there. But you also see the number of startups that have come in, and then related to that, all of the networking optimizations, all of the data center optimizations. So I think the one unmistakable trend is the amount of compute is going to keep exponentially increasing. That means you need that compute to be more efficient. And that means you need innovation to make that more efficient. More efficient in terms of form factor, more efficient in terms of power, more efficient in terms of how much space it takes. And so I think the amount of innovation in hardware is going to keep increasing.
Yeah, I have a feeling Intel might as well be the new Nvidia, the kind of fundamental innovation that
maybe could be,
could be right.
I think if they come up with, and there are lots of these,
Libutan and others.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of talk. I mean, there's quantum compute. There are other forms of compute, and
there are other forms of compute. That's interesting. Yeah.
And so, if they come up with something, they might get there.
Wonderful. On that note of what an old technology cannot do and a new technology can do, let's talk about DigitalOcean. Your extremely surprising move from one of the most powerful position in AI ML in the industry, where you led Amazon over the fastest growing multi-billion-dollar product market. So what is DigitalOcean? Why did you bet on it, and what makes you?
I think if you look at DigitalOcean, by number of customers is the third largest. We have 640,000 paying customers, 120,000 new customers coming in every year in 190 countries.
Amazing.
I think it has a lot of strengths. One of the big pain points, going back to the customer pain point, one of the big pain points of customers using cloud is the complexity of a lot of the hyperscaler solutions. And DigitalOcean has a real ability and has done a really good job of simplifying that offering.
Yeah.
Now, when you take that to the next phase, one of the big issues with AI is it's very complex for a lot of people. In fact, for most people, it's still complex. And so if there is a way of applying that simplicity DNA that DigitalOcean has to AI, I think it would be totally transformational. I also think that because of the segment we are in, and because of a variety of other factors, we also have a more unique ability to apply AI to the cloud itself and reinvent the cloud.
As in, give me a use case, like what?
I think if you think about, you ask this question, what if the cloud was created after AI was created?
Oh, I love that.
Would the cloud have looked the same? Now, let's say you ask this question about what if a bookstore was created after the internet was created? What would it look like? If Barnes & Noble had asked this question, they would have said, you know what, it would have looked like something where everybody orders over the net. Right? Someone asked the question, hey, what would it have looked like to buy something if the internet was created after the phone was created? The phone would have the internet, right? Because that's the thing that you're doing. So where I'm going with this is that when you have a legacy and a transformational technology comes in, the weight of legacy pulls you down. Okay? But if you're creating something after the transformational technology has come, you build from the ground up in a new way. And that building from the ground up in a new way almost always, historically, has resulted in a better thing than retrofitting the legacy, because it's very hard to retrofit a legacy of 20 years. Now when I look at DigitalOcean, we have a cloud, and it's a fairly full-featured cloud, but it doesn't have the legacy of the hyperscalers, right? We are building a lot of things now. And because we are building a lot of the things now, you can build them from the ground up with AI embedded in them, rather than going in and retrofitting AI. And so when you ask the question, transformations typically happen, or transformative products typically come when you're building from the ground up with the transformation embedded in them. And so when you ask the question, hey, if I had to reinvent the cloud, am I more likely to be able to do that in a place where I don't have decades of legacy, or am I better off doing it in a place where a lot of the thing is being built now? And I almost always, I think if you look at the history of technology, almost always you will find that building from the ground up has led ultimately to success than taking a legacy and retrofitting it.
Yeah, no, this is incredible.
And that is what led me to, if I had to reinvent the cloud, it's probably better off in a place like DigitalOcean that does not have decades of legacy, and even the legacy that it has actually solves the most important cloud problem.
No, this is incredible. I was looking at multiple presentations. You're actually going into a lot of detail on how DigitalOcean is saving 30 to 40% revenue in terms of revenue or cost, total cost of operation, right?
Yeah.
So if I'm thinking this is the future of hypervisors, what is this technology called? Hypervisors were cool because they brought compute, data, and everything else together. Now, what is this technology called?
So what DigitalOcean did really well was, I'll give you an analogy. If you have to build a computer, right, you can go to Best Buy and buy all the components like a CPU, a memory, hard disk, and put it all together, right? Or you can go get a laptop. Now, the first one actually has some advantages in some situations because you can build everything to your specification.
Yeah.
In the second one, you may not be able to build everything to your specification, but for most people or for many people, it works out better, right? I think that, in a nutshell, is the difference between a hyperscaler and DigitalOcean. So in a hyperscaler today, you go in and you allocate a CPU or an instance, you attach memory, you attach storage, you attach a VPC, you attach IP addresses, you do IAM roles and all of that. In DigitalOcean, you come in and with a single click, you allocate what's called a droplet. We do all the packaging. We package the compute, the storage, the networking, the IP addresses, the VPC, everything else, so that you can get going started. Now, in this case, you are attaching everything, and so you get a lot of configurability, and you can optimize it whichever way you want. In this case, we are doing all of the packaging for you, so you lose a little bit of that, but in most cases, this works better. Like, most people would rather just buy a laptop off the shelf than assemble the whole thing themselves.
Absolutely.
So that was the fundamental difference, and that has percolated through, the way we work, the way our UX teams are organized, the way our product reviews are done, the way we think about products, the way we think about simplicity, the way we think about pricing. All of that is percolated in.
So is there like a term which you call for this new kind of, I know it's a platform, but hypervisor is a term. What is DigitalOcean?
So we are calling it the Agentic Cloud or the Agentic Hyperscaler.
Agentic Hyperscaler, okay. Tell me more about the Agentic Hyperscaler. What is a typical use case like? And agents adoption is a problem. It's a big problem in the industry. People are building agents. They don't know how to trust them, especially in enterprise. Why is DigitalOcean Agentic Cloud better, and why is it more reliable, and why are people adopting it?
Yeah. So I think there are two parts to this. So the Agentic Cloud or Agentic Hyperscaler. One is using agents to make the cloud better, right? Which is an internal facing agent thing. The second is making it easy for customers to build agents, which is the problem you are referring to. And so we asked ourselves the question, if you go back 20 years, software was an issue. Software was complex, and then you had a bunch of tools and processes come in, which was all under the umbrella of the software development lifecycle, SDLC. And so the way we look at it now is you need a new agent development lifecycle. You need a new set of tools that makes it easy to build and deploy agents. And so, we're building all of those capabilities. What does it mean to have an evaluation framework? What does it mean to have guardrails? What does it mean to have a knowledge base? How do you make serverless inference easy? So it's really about saying, okay, go back and understand the whole agent development and deployment process, understand the pain points, going back to the customer thing, and figure out what are the tools that are needed, right? And if you look at Gradient AI, and we call that a Gradient AI platform, we today people can get started with building agents on our platform maybe 3 to 4x times faster.
Wow.
Okay, and they still get better accuracy and so on. So that is one part of it, and it's going to be a continuous journey, right?
Yeah.
The second part of it is we are also dog fooding it ourselves. So we are internally developing a lot of agentic thing, and we are developing it on that platform, and that tells us, okay, what is not working, and so a lot of that internal feedback is making that better.
So you seem like a delivery platform software. No, actually no, you're building and you're delivering also. So again, it is a comprehensive platform.
Yeah, I mean, we provide the full cloud services. So we have IaaS, the compute network storage, and then we have PaaS, database, and all that. Now we are augmenting it with, of course, GPUs for the AI infrastructure, with this Gradient AI platform, and then our own agents at the top that users can use to interact with the cloud, or they can extend and build themselves.
Yeah, so does the security aspect of this,
it's a big thing, yes,
bother you? Like the data is proliferating, the models are I would say getting more capable with the token window, and there's a lot of intermixing of loyalties here. So how do you deal with that?
Governance is a big aspect of everything we do. And every product that we do, and it's more so with AI, we are very careful, and we have to continue to be very careful about data privacy and making sure that there's no data leakage, and making sure we have like a zero data retention policy. So when customers come in, they use our Gradient AI platform, we don't take any of the data and use that for training models and so on. So we have a very rigorous process from the ground up in terms of ensuring trust and in terms of ensuring privacy of data. And it's a great question. It's a really important thing.
Yeah, wonderful. On that note, what is it about these inflection points? I know you talk about things which cannot be done, which can be done, which make you bet so confidently. I mean, take away the analysis part of it, but really, the agentic is the fourth inflection point which you're on to. You've seen 3 already. What else is really, making you so confident on making these bets?
I think you look at so there is one thing that's always true of technology, which is that it keeps getting better every year. So you look at a particular technology today, and then you ask, if this technology got 10x better or it got 100x better, then would it be able to solve hard problems that we cannot solve today? Right. Because you can always bet on human ingenuity that this thing is going to keep getting better, right? Yeah. If I look at AI today, right, it is doing something that no technology has done before, and it will keep doing more of it, which is it's automating human analysis or human insight.
Yeah.
That is very, very valuable.
But there are so many worlds that can come out of it. How do you bet on the right kind of world?
So the thing that we are all betting on is the fact that this capability of automating human insights and human knowledge, human insights and human analysis, this capability is going to be very transformational, because there are so many tasks that you wish you could do, but you cannot because you are bottlenecked by various things, right? I wish I had 5 other people looking at this piece of data. I wish I had 10 other people writing this other new piece of code. So then this aspect of automating creative work has never been done before.
Yeah.
And this aspect of automating creative work is hugely influential and hugely transformational, because it's basically a force multiplier for all of humanity.
Yeah.
That is what makes me bet on this.
Yeah.
If you go back to the PC or GPU and so on, they were each able to do stuff like, the internet. It automated communication. Before the internet, you had to, maybe write letters and send it. Now you can instantly send it. When you automate communication and reduce the marginal cost of that to zero, it opens up an entirely new domain. If you similarly look at mobility, and you're now able to carry a computer around with you wherever you go, and these computers today are more powerful than supercomputers were 30 years back, then you have reduced the marginal cost of carrying compute with you to zero. So it really goes down to start with the technology, ask the question, this technology, if it gets 100 times better, because it will, human ingenuity makes something go 100x better. If it gets 100x better, is it going to solve a problem that is valuable and is today unsolved? And if the answer is yes, you want to bet on it.
Amazing.
And I think in the case of AI and agents, that answer, you ask that question and you say, okay, if AI agents were to get 100x better, as they will, then they are automating human insight and human analysis, right? That has never been done before, and that can be transformational, because you now suddenly are, today, if you think about it, today what is our biggest bottleneck to improving productivity or improving output? The biggest bottleneck is the lack of time to do a lot of creative work. And you've suddenly taken that constraint off. Right? And so that is why I think we are at the cusp of another transformation, and that is why I think a huge transformation. And I think that is why, in my profession, I'm looking at, okay, how do you reinvent the cloud with AI? And for every leader out there, or for every person out there, it's time to ask, how do you reinvent your own profession with AI?
Amazing. What a mind-blowing question. I will hand it to you. I'll give you a Nobel Prize for asking questions. That being said, you have 70 plus patents at Intel and Nvidia during your time. I want to go quickly back to the IIT days and ask, what are some of the things you want to do differently if you were an IIT, or you want IITs to do different? Because IITians are top CEOs in Fortune 500 companies or Fortune 100 companies. They are kind of guiding technology for the entire world. So considering this global dominance of the IITians in technology and even the economy as such, what would you suggest IITians did right, or what they can do differently?
Look, I think the IIT system is a very unique system, right? I think the rigor that is needed to get in, the preparation that is needed to get in, trains you to be rigorous in pretty much everything you do, and that is a big step. I think at least when I was there, and that's probably true even now, we were always resource constrained in the IITs. Like, it's not that, if you compare the kind of facilities that we had in the IITs compared to some of the best universities in the US, we were a lot more resource constrained. And so then you had to make things work within resource constraints. Guess what? That's what startups do. That's what CEOs do. That's what every company has to do. Even the largest company in the world, even Amazon or Microsoft or Google, they are resource constrained. They can't do everything they want to do. So you have to be able to figure out how I get the job done. There is a term in India that we use for that. Jugaad kind of a thing. You have to figure out how to get it done. And that breeds a few things. It breeds first creativity, because you can't solve the problem by throwing resources at it. So that breeds creativity. In fact, Amazon has a leadership principle, frugality, that's really important. It breeds creativity. It forces you to ask, is this the most efficient use of resources? It breeds grit. Okay, because when you're trying to get something done and you can't throw a lot at it, and you're trying various different ways, a lot of them is going to fail. Okay. And I think in the IITs, the way we lived in the hostels and the way we worked in teams, and the way classes were there, you also learn to work in teams and collaborate. And so I think there's a lot of uniqueness to the system in terms of how and what you have to do before you get in, and how and what you do while you are in there, that probably helps people from IITs do well. That there's a lot of people who are not in IITs who do very well as well. So I don't want to necessarily get into this versus that, but I think that whole process makes it prepares you well for life.
Amazing. On that note, I quickly want to ask you a few questions to explore your personal side. What is the one book that influenced you a lot in your life, like you want to carry it with you?
I think there have been a lot of books that I read very often. I think there's a book on emotional intelligence by Daniel Goleman that I read a lot.
Yeah.
When it comes, I've read a lot of business books. I read a lot of business books, and I've read a lot of business books.
How does it translate in your decision making? Like, does it give you emotional strength? Does it give you grit? Does it give you systems thinking? What does it do?
I think it's a combination. Like, when it comes to product design, I have a lot of admiration for Apple products.
Yeah.
And so I read that Walter Isaacson biography on Steve Jobs. And just, the way he used to think and do that, I think, I've learned a lot. So I think there's a combination of books, whether it's leadership or emotional intelligence or spiritual intelligence or product design, a lot of books, especially Harvard Business School papers that have stuck with me. So I think there's a combination.
Yeah, they have a great collection of books in management here. They've got a whole stack. One technology you're most excited in the next 5 years, which is, of course, agentic, but what else?
I think AI will be a key driver of a lot of innovation. And I think it'll drive innovation, not just in kind of compute and data center and all that, but, it could also lead to, like, if quantum comes in, when it comes in, I think it drives a whole new set of innovations that are coming in. I also, that this might lead to real breakthroughs, like we're already seeing in how energy is created, like, a lot
That's a great one.
A lot of the data centers.
We will get into the space if we solve the energy problem, right?
Yes. I think space looks like another frontier that a lot of people are doing. So I think this is a great time to be around, honestly.
Of course. And best investment a startup can make in infrastructure today. What would they most benefit? So
I think, go ahead.
I try out a lot of ideas, with startups, and we come at the point where we need funding to execute this. So if we are in that frugal state, we're struggling. What is a good investment at that point?
I think it is a couple of things. One is, I'll go back to understand your customer really well. Like, you got to start with a pain point, okay, and a pervasive, deep pain point. To me, the most important thing that a startup, or for that matter, any person designing a product in a startup or a big company can do, is truly understand a pain point that is pretty pervasive. Okay, the more pervasive, the better off, and the deeper the pain point, the better off. To me, that's the most important thing that a startup can do. And then the next thing I would do that is say, okay, I have a pain point. How can I solve it by leveraging as much of what is there as possible? So if it comes to building infrastructure, in the cloud, one of which is DigitalOcean, or if it comes to AI models, look at all of it that is already there and try not to replicate it, but just to reuse it and see how you build on top of it.
Wonderful. And the most underrated skill for building AI products, like you see it in the stars for building AI products, but it's not talked about.
I think it's, I hate to come back to the same thing.
Yes, it is.
But I think it comes back to how do I seamlessly integrate AI into the customer's life?
Right.
Like,
Yes.
if you have to change the way you work
Yeah.
in very pervasive ways,
Yeah.
then the friction to adopt it will be really big. But if there is a really nice way of integrating it into existing workflows or just changing it a little,
Yeah.
and getting the accuracy right and getting the cost envelope right, so I would say that maybe that last mile problem of integrating AI
Yeah.
into a workflow and doing it as seamlessly and easily as possible,
Yep.
so that the customer or the recipient doesn't need to be an AI expert.
Yeah.
I think that is really important.
Oh, I think you nailed it. Great advice. Amazing. That was a nice rapid fire round. It didn't seem like fun.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for your most valuable time. I don't know how to call this. How valuable is this? I think this is like a timeless asset that we created just now, the past hour. Thank you so much, Dr. Saha. It's been truly an honor.
Thank you for having me. It's been a real pleasure talking to you.
Wonderful.